the first question had to do with getting paid workers' compensation, an award. How does somebody get paid? And the reason the question had come up was because one person had gotten their full award and another person had gotten a partial part of their award and then payments. So I wanted to take a few minutes and just sort of explain this to everyone. When you get hurt at work, there's a date of accident. We're going to go with the specific injury case, okay? Because there's not a specific injury if you have that occupational condition. But for purposes of our discussion, there's a specific date of accident. I tripped and I fell on this date, okay? Now, let's say you got to be out of work for a little bit. So you're out of work for a little bit. And then you continue seeing the doctors, but you return to work. So now, from the day you go back to work, so you have your date of accident over here, then you move forward, and then this is the day you return to work. Now, from the day you return to work, that's the important day, because that's the day that they start counting what are called weeks of disability, right? So what happens is when the case eventually settles in workers' compensation court, although you receive a dollar award for the injury, that award is actually a percentage of disability. And every single percentage of disability, 10, 20, 30, whatever, has underneath that sort of, or it equals a number of weeks of payments times a dollar rate. So I'll give you an example. 10% of disability is 60 weeks of payments multiplied by a dollar rate per week to equal the total. So what that means is that if, when you go back to work, by the time your case settles, if 60 weeks have come and gone, then the entire award is accrued and you get the whole thing in a lump sum. If 60 weeks has not yet come, say it's exactly 1 year, so it's only 52 weeks, then you get 52 weeks of payments in a lump sum. And then you get either biweekly or monthly payments until the rest of the 60 weeks is paid. So basically, it's a function of two things. One, how great of a percentage of disability are you receiving? Because 10% is 60 weeks, 20% is 120 weeks, 30%, 180 weeks. So again, if your case is settling and only 60 weeks has come and gone from the time that workers' comp stops paying you workers' comp temporary disability and the time that you get your award, if only 60 weeks has come and gone, then you're going to get that 60 weeks accrued, and then the next 120 weeks, or basically 2.5 years, you're going to get biweekly or monthly payments from workers' compensation. Now, there's two sides to this coin, right? The first side is, well, that stinks. I don't get all my money up front. True. However, what workers' compensation says is from the day that you get your final payment, from that day, you now have an additional 2-year window where you can reopen your case and ask for additional treatment, additional benefits. So by getting paid out over a period of time, what it does is it extends the statute of limitations by which you can get additional benefits through workers' compensation. So David, in your situation right there where the case hasn't settled once in that long a period of time, if you have not received dollars from workers' comp based on temporary disability payments, then that's an enormous period of time that's accrued. So what that means then is that more than likely, any award you're going to get is going to be paid to you in a lump sum amount of money. So that was the first question that somebody had asked. So I thought that would be a good one to sort of go through a little bit. The second question that somebody asked was why, when the case is over and you're moving towards settlement, Why is it that someone has to go see more doctors or evaluating doctors? And I wanted to address that because depending on the injuries that someone has sustained, they can be in any number of medical areas: orthopedics, neurologic, psychiatric, whatever the case might be. So what that means then is that in order to resolve a case, in order to get the case settled, you have to have not the treating doctors, but their records obviously and their information is very helpful, but you have to have permanent, what are called permanency evaluations. Basically an expert's report that outlines, in whichever side you're seeing, the opinion of that doctor as to the value of the case. So let's say we slip and fall and I break my arm. My doctor is going to say that I have a 40 or 50% disability. Their doctor is going to say 5 or 7.5. And that's typical. It's typical to see where that disparity in numbers. And that's just simply because it's the doctor that's representing whichever particular side. So when we go to court then and we say, okay, here's what happened. I have a 52-year-old who works as a maintenance guy who slipped and fell and broke his arm and had to be out of work for 6 months. And then we go through the rest of the medical history. And then when we get to that point, the case gets resolved. Now, what if you can't agree on a percentage? No problem. We would have to then have a trial. And at trial, you would testify, then the doctors would testify, and then a judge renders a decision, and that decision is the percentage of disability that's decided. There's no jury in workers' comp, so it's the judge that you're discussing the case with, the judge who hears all the evidence, and then the judge renders a decision. So you have a trial if you can't agree on a percentage of disability. Now, sometimes I explain to clients, and again, it's very, very fact sensitive, but sometimes let's say if we want 40% and they're offering 35%, right? The question then says, okay, do we want to potentially wait a year to have a trial, get a decision, or do we want to take the 35% now and then reopen the case in 6 or 9 months and already be on our way in terms of more treatment on a reopener than we would on the trying to fight for the 40%? And the answer is, that doesn't always happen that way because people don't necessarily get worse. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But if they do, then you would already be on that reopener pathway. And if not, then the case would resolve. But it's a function of the communication between the attorney and the client as to the strategy behind which direction you want to go.